Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today is Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. In this video, I'm going to cover the economy and the effects of this COVID-19, people are calling it COVID-1984 lockdown of not just society but the economy. In my very first video that I posted last weekend, I mentioned how big companies and billionaires are, definitely profiting off this, especially the central bank, the Federal Reserve, and private banks are making a killing off the interests of all these loans that are going out in the guise of helping people. They really care about helping people, you see. How America's rich have turned the pandemic into profit. The very first sentence, never let a good crisis go to waste. Says that America's 1% have taken profitable advantage of that old saying. That's probably because they invented that saying. Most average people just kind of suffer. They don't actually take advantage of it. And when they do, you'll see stories much like this. The average Joe thinks he's going to take advantage of a crisis. Brothers who hoarded 17,000 hand sanitizer bottles avoid a fine after donating supplies. And they were forced to do this. Very messed up. I remember when I first heard about that, someone was saying it, and they were saying it as if, these people were in the wrong. And I'm like, well, dude, there's people making billions off this crisis. So God forbid if the average person gets ahead of the curve and spends their own money and buys 17,000 bottles of hand sanitizer, knowing that, the value is going to go up. Well, they avoided prosecution and a fine. But they will not recoup the thousands of dollars that they spent. $1,000, that's a loss for them. They can't just go to the federal government and ask for $1 million bailout like these private companies will. It posted it on Amazon. Amazon pulled the additional items that he had listed at a higher price than what he had paid. Disrupting necessary supplies during unprecedented pandemic is a serious offense, said the Attorney General. Some of the richest people in the U.S. have been at the front of the queue as the government has handed out trillions of dollars to prop up the economy. At that same time, the billionaire class has added $300 billion to its wealth in 4 weeks, even as a record 26 million people lost their jobs. Between March 18th and April 22nd, the wealth of America's plutocrats grew 10.5%, and it said it took them over 2 years for total billionaire wealth to get back to levels they enjoyed in 2007. So 2 years, and took about 12 years for the average person to start seeing, to get back basically to the level that they were at, only to have it destroyed in 1 month. Some of those billionaires saw their worth surge by $1 billion, including, that's right, Amazon. So Amazon's going to make out. And Microsoft, Bill Gates' company. The billionaire bonanza comes as a flotilla of big business, millionaires and billionaires. I like how they throw the millionaire in there with these guys. The millionaire is your actual local small business. And billionaires sail through loopholes in a $350 billion bailout meant to save hard-hit small businesses. How big banks, including Chase and Citi, helped virtually all of their clients get millions of dollars in pandemic aid, while up to 94% of their smaller customers got nothing. This is part of the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, $350 billion emergency loans. So basically, they prioritize their richest customers. Thousands of small businesses struggled to submit applications online, crowded online portals, while bank reps were told to ignore their calls. American billionaires have gotten $280 billion richer since the start of the COVID pandemic. Their net worth is rising at a time when millions and millions of people are finding themselves out of work. That's a combined net worth of $3 trillion. They're referred to as pandemic profiteers. And since 1980s, the taxes paid by billionaires has dropped by 79%. Talking about these benevolent billionaires helping people, they care. We're reading about the benevolent billionaires sharing 0.0001% of their wealth with their fellow humans in this crisis, but in fact they've been rigging the tax rules to reduce their taxes for decades, money that could have been spent building a better public health infrastructure. Who will get the money from the second small business loan bill? Trump signs another bill, $484 billion relief package. Part of that is the $25 billion for coronavirus testing, which is that test kit that I was talking about in the last video, which is what Bill Gates was invested into. So he will, that benevolent philanthropist, Bill Gates, he's not just giving money away and throwing it away. No, it's going to all come back to him. And it serves his interests of population control. $75 billion in additional funding to healthcare provider relief fund, which is, not bad, I guess, in places that are hard hit like New York. But for most of the other places, where's it going to actually go? There's volunteers and nurses that are being paid $3,000 a week for doing nothing. They don't have anything to do. I just covered an article yesterday that said 8% of however many volunteers it was, I don't know, it was 3,500, 8% of them actually got hired to do something because there's nothing for them to do. The ventilators not being used, not required. Just any excuse for the government to spend money so the Federal Reserve can make the money off the interest. And before, in mid-March when all this started, the lockdown didn't even begin. So you couldn't even tell that people were hurting from it because it just started, and they were already trying to get a $2 trillion bill and sending out corona checks. I was like, this is kind of premature. I was like, I don't really need it. I'm considered essential with my work. I'm still doing it. I don't want it. And they gave it to me anyways. And I was just told by somebody yeah, you got to pay it back. And I'd heard that and I didn't believe it. So we'll see. But maybe that's the whole point, is to destroy the economy so that they can have all these bailouts and stimuluses. Nonprofits linked to Soros, Koch brothers seek small business coronavirus loans. It says nonprofits connected to billionaire donors, or talking about nonprofit organizations, I guess, are also reportedly applying for their share of hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans that can be fully forgiven if recipients use them to avoid laying off workers. So I guess they're talking about the George Soros groups that hire Antifa to go around carrying out violence against peaceful protesters. They consider less than 500 people small business, and it says that the terms are pretty generous. The full amount of the loan will be forgiven if it is used for payroll, mortgage, interest, rent, utilities, in the 2 months after the money is received. According to Financial Times, banks stand to make billions by overseeing the distribution of these loans as they receive processing fees paid by the federal government for making the loans. News outlets have received more than $23 million in forgivable stimulus loans. As I said, newspapers were struggling to stay profitable before the coronavirus. So this is someone different, someone other than these guys here. It says here, this guy hoarded masks and protective equipment to resell from his store, now faces jail time under the Defense Act. New York businessman who had the foresight to stock up on personal protective equipment said he's being charged with violating U.S. Defense Production Act for hoarding and price gouging. I didn't know this. President Trump's March 18th executive order made it illegal to hoard medical supplies and then resell them at excessive prices. I guess it was postal inspectors that seized 23 pallets of all of his inventory, and then when I went down, they actually referred to it as illegal profits. And the money will most likely not be refunded to him. But something tells me that this guy, I guess he's a masked Jew selling toilet paper on the street, is probably not going to get harassed by the federal government. Record 22, I believe it's 26 now, million Americans have sought unemployment over the last month, wiping out all the job gains since the Great Recession, 2008. And then it also said something like the record drop in retail sales in March is the biggest decline in factory output since 1946. Some real statistics as far as deaths by coronavirus were the thousands of U.S. businesses that were shut down and will be closed permanently. And that's the thing, these big corporations that are getting the money, and I said in their retail chain, so I'm assuming like McDonald's and that have drive-thrus still open, they're able to weather the storm even if they shut completely. But small businesses, they can't. And if they have been closed for last month, they may not be able to recover from it, and then they're not getting the money that they need to stay running, which is a pretty big deal because it said something about half the workforce comes from small businesses. That's like a lot of unemployed people. These small to mid-sized businesses, just like those newspapers, many of them were barely surviving before the pandemic, and now these lockdowns have delivered a death blow. Another reference to the World War II, the economy is contracting the fastest rate since World War II. It says 28% of all independent restaurants are probably not going to survive these lockdowns for another month. You have the fitness industry. One of these 24-hour gym chains is filing for bankruptcy. Also entertainment, like the movie theater, tourism, and retail industries. There was another one too off Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman's, and another one. Those big department stores were also filing for bankruptcy. How shutdowns will keep killing the economy even when they're over. Remember, this is a 3-phase plan, and who knows how long these 3 phases, each phase is going to take. I'm guessing it's going to take like at least a month, so you can figure 3 months from, say, the beginning of May, June, July, so the beginning of August, when social distancing will end. That's when people can go to the gyms. That's when people can go to the movie theaters. That's when people can do stuff like that, where they can... So anyways, but it's saying that there's all these other different things like landlords and rent, and people would just sit there and not pay rent. I mean, you can't run a business like that. When are they going to actually be able to start collecting rent so they don't have to go under because they have payments as well? Healthcare services like eye care and dental care are being deemed unnecessary. Their offices will be closed, collecting little to no revenue. Like restaurants, they're not permitted to do anything besides takeout. That could be 6 months from now. It says these restaurants still have to pay rent for their dining rooms. So we're being told that this could go on for months. Definitely this can go on for years. It's going to be back in the fall. And how are all of these businesses supposed to plan for the future when they could just shut things down again? The point of this article is basically about uncertainty. And in a business, it's all about planning for the future. How could you plan for something that's like this type of environment? For people who have been for this lockdown and are still for it for some reason, you can pose this type of statistics to them. Is it really justified? Is it really worth it, this lockdown? 565 Americans have lost their job for every confirmed COVID-19 death in the U.S. I laughed when I saw this article. A flight attendant union told to America says, "Please don't fly for leisure amid coronavirus." Airlines are turning to governments for rescue money. So just like Bill Gates said, air travel will be much different when this lockdown nightmare is over, including in-flight social distancing, reducing in-flight food, just everything just gets more... Just basically, it gets less of everything. It gets shittier. Among other things, compulsory face masks, tedious longer queues. One of the supermarkets here in town where I live, and it's not a big city or anything, or even a big town, the only one here, and they just now require to wear a face mask. I didn't even know. Somebody asked me when I was going in, "Hey, do you know they do face masks?" And blah, blah, blah. And so I guess they're starting that. So they just keep making it more and more as things get less and less, as the risk gets less and less. They just keep going more and more with these requirements. There's an Amish community here, and they don't wear masks. Just think of the amount of money that's being lost by these companies. Even this supermarket chain that's here locally, I mean, it's still, they would be probably getting some kind of bailout. So they're going to still make up their money. But imagine all this money they're losing. But then it's going to be subsidized by taxpayers. But in the end, all these companies and these corporations, they just love appearing as if they're so humanitarian, so good. Meanwhile, this same supermarket I'm talking about, they shut down the water like a month and a half ago. They actually shut down where you can get like filtered water, so it's not tap water. And that's my main source of water for like the last 10 years. They just shut it down. No water for you. Treasury Secretary says that the economy will bounce back in months. And the chairman of the Federal Reserve says now's not the time to be concerned about debt, as the U.S. Federal Reserve to put the world on its back with a $2.3 trillion injection. After 3 coronavirus stimulus packages, Congress is already prepping Phase 4. U.S. heading for Great Depression amid coronavirus-induced economic and job collapse. Senator Kennedy says economy will collapse if it's closed until COVID-19 cases are gone. And the food supply chain is breaking, and I'm seeing this everywhere about meat shortages. This is GGN. Thank you.